Kwekwe, Upsalaji. Good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour, bienvenue. Ninda Luisi, Danielle White. Wadabagizi Nudyokanik Uktahamguk. My name is Danielle White. I'm originally from Mi'kma'ki territory in the west coast of Newfoundland, and I'll be your moderator this afternoon. I'm a member of the Halibu Mi'kmaq First Nation, and I'm an Assistant Deputy Minister at Indigenous Services Canada. Thank you all for joining us for today's segment on career discussions with newer Indigenous public servants. Donc, bienvenue à la séance aujourd'hui, discussion de carrière avec des nouveaux fonctionnaires autochtones. To get us started in a good way, I would like to pass it over to our colleague and friend, Michelle Smith, who will do a traditional opening. Donc, j'aimerais accueillir Michelle Smith qui va faire l'ouverture de la session aujourd'hui. Michelle?
Merci beaucoup. Merci, Danielle. Choir, good afternoon, bonjour. I want to acknowledge that I'm standing today on a traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation, and I would like to also acknowledge the many contributions that the Algonquin people have made and continue to make to Canadian society. Je vous invite tous et toutes à prendre quelques instants pour reconnaître le territoire autochtone, traditionnel et non cédé sur lequel vous habitez, et également de reconnaître la contribution des personnes autochtones sur ce territoire. Kwai, Ende Louisi, Padogi Payo, Oleone Tabaldak. Creator, we give you thanks for this beautiful day, and we give you thanks for all of your creations. Créateur, on te remercie également pour notre terre maman qui nous donne tout ce dont il nous faut afin que nous puissions vivre une vie équilibrée et intègre sur la terre, l'île de la Tortue. Creator, we give you thanks for all the women in our lives, to our kokums, our grandmothers, our mothers, our aunties, our sisters, our partners, our daughters, and our granddaughters. They are the givers of life. They are the keepers of the sacred water. And we need to continue to honor and to respect them. Creator, we ask that you look over all those who have been affected by the discovery of 215 unmarked graves at the former residential school in Kamloops. May we all find solace in knowing that we will soon be able to properly bury our young brothers and sisters in keeping with our traditions, our customs, and our beliefs. Créateur, accorde-nous la force afin de poursuivre notre combat pour éliminer et enrayer toute forme de racisme, de discrimination et de violence. Finally, Creator, we ask that you give us the courage and the wisdom to listen and to speak with an open heart and an open mind. Oleoni, Jimigwet, Kuyanamik, merci, thank you, merci. Oh.
Merci, Michelle, with all in Miigwech. And now I'd like to ask Deputy Minister Gina Wilson and Champion for Indigenous Employees to deliver some opening remarks. Donc, j'aimerais accueillir le sous-ministre Gina Wilson pour qu'elle prononce quelques mots d'ouverture à l'événement d'aujourd'hui. Gina?
Thank you. Merci. Miigwech. Kwe. Bonjour. Hello. Good afternoon. Danielle White, thank you for doing this. And Michelle, thank you for the prayer. And thank the organizers for the invitation to join here today. Gina Wilson, Indigenous, sous-ministre de la diversité et inclusion et jeunesse et sous-championne des fonctionnaires fédéraux autochtones is my title. I too want to acknowledge the land we are gathered on, the traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people, and also want to have you take the moment to recognize the territories that you may also be on in your particular areas. I also want to acknowledge those children Michelle referred to, those children that didn't make it home, those children that didn't get to grow up, and our children today who carry that burden, and our young people. And I know that we've all been having a lot of different feelings about that, and so want to acknowledge that that I am too, and I know Danielle, Michelle have been too. It's been a difficult time, but you know it's nice to also see that that there's good in Canadians too. When you see the orange shirts, or you see the outpouring of support, we see the good in people as well. So today's discussion is really important, and I'd like to thank you all for being here to hear the panelists, their stories, their insights, as we recognize National Indigenous History Month, and next week, June 21st, we'll be celebrating National Indigenous Day, or acknowledging it in all kinds of ways. It's the beginning of the summer solstice, and these two webcasts are an important partnership between the Federal Youth Network and the Knowledge Circle for Indigenous Inclusion. So want to say hello to everyone, especially those of you who may be from Gittigan-Zibi. I got a little place in my heart for Gittigan-Zibi. So if you are from Gittigan-Zibi, shoot me a message, send me an email. I want to know that you're there. Il est important d'amplifier les voix des fonctionnaires autochtones, de partager les histoires, les défis, mais aussi de célébrer les succès. Je suis ravie de voir le talent dont font preuve aujourd'hui chacune de nos intervenants. J'ai hâte d'entendre aussi leur point de vue et de voir comment nous pouvons continuer à améliorer les expériences des fonctionnaires autochtones, mais aussi la vie des peuples autochtones du Canada. Just reflecting a little bit on in my entering the public service, which was many moons ago. It was, I came in as actually a student, a summer student, and was really needing to score a job because I was living in the city and I had my rent to pay, and the lease went until September. And so, you know, I was really trying to find something, and I got an interview at what was then, what is now ESDC. Back then, I actually think it was called Manpower. That's how old I am. Manpower, right? Or it might have been called Employment and Immigration. I remember Barbara McDougall was minister because she had the same name that I did. So I certainly remember that. So I went to work in an office with actually a very diverse team that were there. They were very open, supportive, funny, you know, really created a lot of teamwork for me. They gave me a really good, positive public service experience. The work I was doing was pretty boring. Hopefully we have more meaningful things to do these days, but I was actually filing and photocopying dockets. And I knew every docket in that branch by heart, I think, at one point. So dockets, I was dreaming dockets at night, how many dockets there were. And I remember the director general, you know, his office was way over there. And I think he said hello to me once. And little did I know that I would be a director general at ESDC, Director General of Aboriginal Affairs. And actually my office was kind of around where his office was. So that was kind of odd. And then little did I know that I would come back to ESDC as an associate deputy minister, which was my first appointment into the DM ranks. So that's just a little short story on my entry into the public service. I did a lot of different things after that, but definitely had a calling to return, and certainly have never regretted that decision. I've been able to do a lot of great things that I hope have had an impact on Indigenous peoples and Canadians. Alors, avec ça, I don't have a lot of time because we want to hear from the panelists. Alors, je cède maintenant la parole à notre modératrice pour événement aujourd'hui, Danielle.
Miigwech, Gina, thank you. I love hearing your story. I've heard it before, but I feel like I learn something new about you every time. Donc, avant de commencer, juste quelques points à considérer. Au fur et à mesure que nous progressons dans la session aujourd'hui, veuillez partager vos commentaires en utilisant le bouton questions et réponses dans la langue de votre choix. Et vous pouvez aussi voter pour les questions que vous voulez que soient posées en cliquant sur le bouton le pouce en l'air. So as we move through today's session, please share your comments in the chat space and your questions using the Q&A button in the language of your choice. And you can vote for the questions you would like us to put to the panel by clicking on the thumbs up button. And helpfully, Marcella is posting bios of the panelists and the participants in the chat if you'd like to know a little bit more about anyone. And maybe with that, we can get to the panel. So I'd like to remind everyone that the conversation today is really about the sharing of lived experiences. And we have 4 panelists, or actually, I think we have 3 panelists joining us. They'll share their experiences around their career choices and the paths they've taken, as well as obstacles they've faced and ways they've been able to overcome them. Donc, aujourd'hui, nous accueillons 3 panélistes. Ils partageront leurs expériences vécues autour des choix de carrière, les chemins qui sont pris, ainsi que les obstacles et les moyens qu'ils ont pu surmonter. Donc, allons les rencontrer. So let's meet the panelists. And a huge thank you to all of you for joining us today. So to get the conversation going, I'm going to pose the same question to each of the panelists. And maybe Sandy, will start with you, but tell us something about you. So maybe a favorite school, volunteer experience, or career moment, and then we'll go to each of the panelists.
Okay, thank you. Joignez, yeah, my name is Sandy. My email is Alexandra, but I usually answer to Sandy Archibald. So I'm from Northern Ontario, as it says in my bio, and my career path was not a straightforward journey. Growing up, I was the kid that had no idea what they wanted to be. And even though I'm an adult, I still have no clue. So I'm still figuring that out. However, in my personal and professional development, it did become clear that I loved helping people. And that was a common thread in my career journey, was that I found enjoyment and fulfillment in positions that allowed me to help my Indigenous community members. So here I am today with a great team, and we are helping Indigenous community members find ways to get into public service. So I feel very fortunate to be working in a role that allows that to happen.
Great, thank you. Isabelle, pour commencer notre conversation, dites-nous quelque chose sur vous, par exemple, un moment préféré à l'école, le bénévolat ou dans votre carrière.
Bonjour, mon nom est Isabelle Dallaire. Je suis membre de la Première Nation des Malécites de Vigée qui est située dans le coin du bas du fleuve Saint-Laurent, bas du fleuve, donc près Kakuna et Whitworth. Ça me fait plaisir d'être ici aujourd'hui. En fait, par rapport à où j'ai commencé ma carrière, j'ai appris tardivement mes origines autochtones. Donc, c'est suite à mes cousines qui ont refait l'arbre généalogique et puis à ce moment-là, nous ont appris qu'on était autochtone, qu'on était malécite de Vigée. Donc, à partir de ce moment-là, je ne savais pas ce que ça voulait dire. J'étais je ne comprenais pas. J'avais pas personne à qui me référer à ce moment-là pour pouvoir me permettre de connaître ma culture, de me reconnecter avec ce que ça voulait dire être une personne autochtone. Donc, à ce moment-là, j'avais 14 ans. J'en ai aujourd'hui 32. Donc, je pense qu'il faut faire confiance à la vie. Je crois que la vie a remis sur mon chemin la possibilité de me reconnecter avec ma culture. Suite à un poste que j'ai eu au niveau de ma carrière, à ce moment-là, j'étais au privé. Donc, j'ai débuté ma carrière comme étudiante. Et puis, par la suite, j'ai malheureusement pas eu un contrat qui s'est poursuivi. Alors, j'ai dû décider d'aller travailler au privé. Et j'ai fait presque 7 ans au privé avant de revenir au gouvernement comme fonctionnaire. Et puis, à ce moment-là, je me suis retrouvée à rencontrer des personnes qui s'occupaient du centre pour étudiants autochtones dans un collège francophone de la région, dans le coin d'Ottawa, donc la cité. Et puis, on m'a permis de m'occuper du centre pour étudiants autochtones, donc de rencontrer des aînés, de reconnecter avec ma culture. Je remercie la vie d'avoir eu ces gens-là sur mon parcours pour m'avoir donné envie de connaître d'où je viens. ce que j'avais envie de vivre, ce à quoi aujourd'hui je réalise que je suis en recrutement autochtone des étudiants, donc pour Relations couronne affaires autochtones du Nord Canada. Et puis pour moi, ça m'a juste amené à faire ce travail-là. Donc, je pense qu'il faut faire confiance à la vie et prendre l'opportunité quand on rencontre des gens là, qui nous proposent des nouvelles possibilités, de prendre la chance d'essayer quelque chose parce que ça peut nous amener à un moment dans nos vies où on ne s'attendait pas à se rendre là. Donc, c'est ça. Puis, j'ai un bac en communication. Et puis, présentement, je travaille en ressources humaines. Donc, je pourrais en donner un petit peu plus de détails dans les prochaines questions.
Merci, Isabelle. So, Aaron, tell us something you'd like us to know about you.
Hi, Tanshi. My name is Aaron Cates, and I'm here on the Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homelands of the Métis Nation here, calling in from Winnipeg, Manitoba. I'm new to the public service, but have been around for a couple of years, and the experiences that I've had and some cool things is I essentially have two real professional careers here. One is my daytime job, which is here with the Government of Canada. But then also as well too is as soon as I'm done here, I do my second one, which is coaching elite youth hockey here. I've done it in many cities in Ottawa, but has mostly been here in Winnipeg as well. So I've been around youth my entire life, from the youth ages from 12 to 17. And it is quite an immense experience to be able to do that and give back to my communities, and the experience that I've also had of living in other countries such as Mexico down there. I was living down there for a little while to broaden my horizons and broaden my experiences as well too, because that's where I feel you really learn the most is getting out there and seeing the world and experiencing new and different things. That's where you really become your best self, and you learn a lot about yourself.
Great, thanks. So Aaron, maybe we'll stay with you for a moment. And I wanted to ask a question about the impact of COVID-19 on our workplace and on our path in the public servant. So over the last 16 months, how has the change in our work life affected your perspective on your career goals? Has it had an effect, and if so, how?
It has had an effect with my career goals, as when I first entered the public service, you could say was quite some time ago. As the traditional route, I was a student. So I was studying full-time here in Winnipeg, but then every summer I would drive that 26-hour drive going out to Ottawa and doing my summer terms there, because that's where the job was. And so I would be doing that back and forth after a while. And then once I was ending my schooling, I was looking at the possibility of being bridged in there into a full-time position. And when I was speaking with my manager and seeing what options were available, at that time, remote work wasn't really a thing. It was very much in its infancy stage at best. And it was a high risk to do it for an organization so far away from the national capital. So the option I was given was, if you wanted this government position when you're right out of school, which so many people want to get that, it's like, yeah, permanent full-time job, that's what we want right away. It was in Ottawa. And so that meant that it would be leaving everything that I learned, everything that I've grown up around in Winnipeg, leaving that and starting a new chapter in Ottawa. And so I took that leap of faith. I took that risk, dived headfirst in there, packed up my car, everything that I could, and did that drive to Ottawa and started my career out there. I was with a lot of experience in student recruitment, doing a lot of stuff. But then once COVID-19 hit, I was at a point within my public service career here where I was leading the national initiatives such as the Indigenous Student Employment Opportunity. And so we were doing a lot of events nationally. And for me as a worker here, I was doing it all from home at that time in Ottawa, downtown, living in my 1-bedroom apartment there, figuring out, how am I going to set up my computer? How am I going to set up my board here? How am I going to be able to do these events or interact like I normally do in person? And so I made that adjustment. I made that challenge, and it actually helped increase the productivity and actually increase the amount of programming that we could do, because I was able to do a lot more within my work hours. And after a couple months had went by, during that time where I was really starting to get into the groove of really getting adjusted to working from home, having a really productive and heavy workload, leading a national program, doing lots of events and connecting with a lot of people there, was mastering MS Teams and Zoom. And I started to ask myself, I said, do I really need to be here in Ottawa anymore? Because for me, when I originally left for Ottawa, I didn't have any of the family or the friends that were in Ottawa. It was truly, I was the one branching out and separating on my own out there. And so once I started to realize that I could have my career and do everything that I've been normally doing as I would pre-pandemic, if I can do that at home, why can't I do that in my home community in Winnipeg? And so that started to lead discussions with management and with senior leaders to figure out, how can we get me back to my home community and be able to still continue to do the work that I love to do? And so I was able to, a couple months ago, I was able to make that move officially back to my home community and be able to continue doing the work that I've always been doing, always that I love. But now I'm able to actually do it around my support system. Because for me in the past, if I wanted to visit family and friends, I would have had to book off 2 weeks. I would have had to go on for a 2-hour drive to go and see them. It was very, very challenging. And during that pandemic, everything was locked down and we couldn't travel. So that was a negative impact, but the positive impact was that it actually led me to be able to get home to my community, something that I didn't think was ever possible before the pandemic. I thought, you know what, I'm here in Ottawa for a while here, better get used to it. Nope. But then we started to have conversations to figure out how I could be supported to continue doing the work that I love to do. And it actually increased and created a positive impact on my work and professional life.
Great. Thank you. I too took advantage of last summer to move back home, and I hadn't spent that much time there since I went away to go to university many years ago, but being able to live and work remotely was definitely a silver lining, I think, for many of us. I'm going to move on to the next question, and this one is for Sandy. And I think, this is a challenging but important one. If we think about diversity and inclusion, recognizing there are still many barriers that exist, and part of the way we're going to overcome those barriers is by actually, talking openly and acknowledging them and thinking about how to overcome them. So I'm wondering if you could share your experience with a systemic barrier or a racist attitude that you've had to address and overcome in your career.
For sure. So I grew up in Northern Ontario, and it was common to experience racism directly and indirectly. That experience shapes you and how you respond to certain situations and how you learn to adapt to those types of environments. For myself, it took a heavy toll on my own self-confidence. I always grew up with that sense of having to work 3 times harder than my non-Indigenous peers to get that sense of being considered an equal or exceptional. So although it may have kind of benefited me because I demonstrate that strong work ethic, it also weighs heavy on me because I am more prone to burnout. It is still something I struggle with today. And I consider myself very fortunate to work with a team that is 90% Indigenous. I feel safe being Indigenous, and I hope that the work that I'm involved with will provide that safety for newer Indigenous employees wherever they find themselves in public service.
You're muted, Danielle.
Sorry, I just get carried away. Donc, un peu dans la même veine, une question pour Isabelle. Vous avez dit que vous avez souffert du syndrome de l'imposteur. Parlez-nous de ce syndrome et de la façon dont vous l'avez surmonté.
Souvent, par exemple, quand j'arrive dans une rencontre ou au début, je me souviens à mon arrivée là, comme fonctionnaire, j'avais ce syndrome de l'imposteur-là de me présenter comme une personne autochtone parce que j'ai les cheveux blonds, parce que j'ai les yeux bleus, parce que je parle français, parce que souvent, on pense que les personnes autochtones parlent seulement en anglais. Donc, c'est quelque chose dont j'ai dû faire face et j'ai dû me reconnecter à moi-même parce qu'il y a une partie à moi qui me revient dans le sens où il y a une question d'estime, de s'assumer, de se lever, d'être forte, de dire « oui, je suis autochtone, je connais ma culture, j'ai eu l'aide des aînés pour me rappeler que je suis autochtone », mais il y a aussi le regard des gens qui parfois peut être difficile. Souvent, on va voir dans les yeux des gens ou, par exemple, à l'extérieur du travail, ça m'arrive fréquemment. Donc, je vais parler avec des gens, je vais dire « oui, je viens de telle communauté, je suis passionnée parce que je suis par ma communauté, puis parce que par la culture, les gens me regardent et on rit. » Donc, ça, c'est difficile. Ça me fait vraiment beaucoup de peine quand ça arrive parce qu'après ça, ça enlève toute la confiance que je me suis donnée en me disant « oui, ça va bien aller, je suis forte, je suis belle, je suis une femme forte, je suis autochtone et je vais assumer tout ce que je suis parce que je suis là pour défendre les gens, je suis là pour faire passer des messages, je suis là pour aider mon monde. » Sauf que quand on rit de moi parce que j'ai les cheveux blonds ou les yeux bleus, c'est sûr que je me sens toute petite. J'ai plus envie de prendre cette place-là. Donc, le syndrome de l'imposteur est difficile. C'est une autre partie du racisme qu'on connaît, mais on en parle moins un peu parce qu'on le ressent moins. Les gens vont dire, ben voyons, t'es blonde aux yeux bleus, là, t'es pas autochtone. Mais je pense que c'est bien aussi, et c'est un peu pourquoi j'ai accepté de prendre un poste où je me suis en allée vers les ressources humaines en recrutement. Je veux briser ces stéréotypes-là chez les gens, que les gens arrêtent de penser qu'être autochtone, c'est être ça, ici. Et c'est tout. Il n'y a rien, mais en fait, au contraire, être autochtone, c'est aussi ce qu'on a appris, c'est chaque communauté est différente, chaque enseignement est différent. C'est d'ouvrir ses horizons, c'est d'ouvrir ses yeux. Donc, c'est un peu le message que moi, de mon côté, j'essaie de passer et ça me prend tout le courage du monde. Il y a des matins, je me lève, je me dis « ah non, je ne me sens pas courageuse aujourd'hui ». Par contre, à chaque fois, je me donne un petit coup de pied puis je me dis « fais-le pour les bonnes raisons, fais-le pour changer les choses. À petite échelle, toi, tu changes les choses et éventuellement, ça va changer des grandes choses. » Donc, fais-toi confiance. Alors, je pense qu'il faut justement arrêter d'avoir ces stéréotypes-là, de penser. Parfois, il faut faire attention à ce qu'on dit ou aux commentaires qu'on passe. On peut être dans l'ascenseur ou être près de gens qu'on ne sait pas, on ne connaît pas le vécu des gens, on ne connaît pas leur origine. Donc, de s'ouvrir à ça, d'être humain à humain et puis faire attention à ce qu'on peut dire. Puis briser le stéréotype d'être autochtone, c'est avoir les cheveux foncés, la peau foncée. Donc, c'est plus que ça, je pense. C'est important de s'ouvrir.
Merci Isabelle. Ça soulève des questions complexes d'identité et encore plus dans le contexte de notre milieu de travail.
Exactement.
Merci. So next question I'll put to all three of you. And it's something that Sandy touched on a little bit in her introduction, but studies show that employees who are passionate about their jobs and their experiences have increased professional success over the long term. Does your job provide you with the challenges that either push or stretch you to achieve success? Who would like to go first? I'm gonna go ahead, Sandy. Thank you.
Okay. First of all, I say yes. My experience with public service has been quite an adjustment from what I encountered in the private and the non-for-profit sector. So one of the major learning curves I found that helped me become a better public servant or employee overall is developing that sense of transparency in the work that you do. So, back in my private sector or non-for-profit sector, career days, I used to come up with ideas and just do them. And then I would add help along the way. And it would be like a charge to the end goal. However, that is not possible in the public service. There's a lot of checks and balances that you have to be aware of before you can carry out an idea. So it may sound like a negative thing, and sometimes it does feel a bit of a hindrance to the work that you want to do or the stuff that you would like to accomplish. The extra bureaucracy provided me actually that extra time to really think things through and to be more intentional about what I was hoping to accomplish with the ideas that I brought forward. So overall, it had allowed me to develop that skill about and consider all the different impacts or implications my work may have on, public service as a whole, and also think of ways to be more effective and efficient with my solutions. So it did give me that chance to really pause and reflect and really think about, if I want to carry out this idea, I need to make sure, I'm not doing anything that I shouldn't be doing, but at the same time, making sure I'm making a meaningful impact on the outcome, the overall outcome. So yeah, that was like one of the major learning curves that I had encountered starting my career with public service.
Great, thank you. Aaron?
And I'll follow up with that is the immediate answer is yes, it does provide me with challenges and it does provide with that success. For me, I am now into my third department here. And because I've been wanting to seek out always new challenges. For me, I grew up as a person that was a type A personality. I was playing at elite level with hockey. So I, to a default, have to be challenged, and I have to, in order to keep my mind busy and feeling fulfilled, is I have to have that challenge. It's like that goal that I want to achieve, I have to do that. And so when I first entered the public service, I was working for Canada Border Services Agency. And so that was within a public safety career, and figuring out how can we recruit students, Indigenous youth, to a public safety organization. That was one of the main challenges that I wanted to tackle early on into my public service career, and that's what I did. And then the second challenge that I wanted to do was I was part of ISCO. I was then hiring from that, and then I wanted to lead it because that's the change that I wanted to do. I had a lot of great ideas, and I wanted to be able to enact on them because I was part of the experience and figuring out how can I make this better? When I was part of it, we should have done this a little bit different. We should have done that a little bit differently. So I seeked out that challenge to figure out how can I get into that organization and how can I enact change with it in order to help other students who are also maybe in the similar experiences that I had. And so through that experience here, I was now asked to join Employment and Social Development Canada here to look at ways of how we can improve Indigenous recruitment, retention, and advancement factors here. So all these areas that I'm always seeking out a new challenge in, and I'm always learning new things along the way. And that's probably the greatest experience that I've had. And it's given me a lot of success because I've been able to make a lot of connections with a lot of good people. And recently back in 2020 in the fall, through my experiences and through my putting myself out there, I was able to lead a project with the Knowledge Center of Indigenous Inclusion, where they asked me to be a part of that. And that was a huge success that I love to have on as part of me and speak about when I'm meeting new people.
Great, thanks. So I'm going to turn now to the Q&A. Lots of great questions in there, and please keep them coming. Donc, je vais tourner vers les questions qui ont été posées par les participants. And there's one theme that comes up actually in a couple of questions. And so as an Indigenous person, did you have any hesitation about working for the federal government? And if so, how did you reconcile your indigeneity with working in the public service? And then a related question to that, because that question sort of speaks to your experience of coming into the public service, but as well on an ongoing basis, how do you balance your personal commitment to your community and your employment? And how do you manage those difficult conversations with other Indigenous people outside of government when they mostly, position or think about the government in a negative light? That's a lot in that one question, but I think it's really an important one that we try to surface and explore a little bit. So who would like to tackle that one?
So I'll tackle that one here, and I know that there's multiple parts with that, but I'll first talk about how balancing my professional life as demanding as it is, working with the public service and working in such a big area here, such as Indigenous recruitment, retention, and advancement there. And then also with my personal life of still maintaining relationships, still giving back to my community, is the one thing that I've always made sure of is I've set clear boundaries with my workplace, with my managers. I've always said that for me, I don't mind working a lot, but for me, I also tell them about my personal life is I'm committed to 17 young men that I coach, mentor, help get better, to help them achieve their dreams. So I have to be able to have the time to devote to them as well. So during the work hours, I am here for you, but outside of my work hours, that is the time that I have devoted for these young men, these young individuals here. And that's really, really helped me is I've had those conversations and I've had to tell people, I said, you know what, I cannot work this overtime because I have to go have a meeting with my players here. I have to go help them with something here. Or we have an upcoming road trip here. I'm taking a day off because they need me here for that. And once I have those conversations and tell them about where I'm coming from, that's helped create a really healthy relationship to balance between the demands of my professional life and the demands of my personal life and the community that I'm trying to help here as well. And with the part two of that is for me working in I guess it would be an external facing position, almost like recruitment here. I used to travel a lot with that, and I used to get that question a bit here. And I've always said right away, I said, we all want to make a difference. We all have ideas of how to fix something, but the best way to do it is to come on the inside and bring those ideas and make that change from the inside. It has to start somewhere. All right. If it hasn't been working from the outside, maybe it's time to come on the inside and make that change right away. And so that's the biggest thing that led me to join the public service, is because I've also had friends and family that have said you have the normal conversations about the government of Canada with it. But when I tell them, I said, this is the exact work that I'm doing, is trying to help community members find meaningful employment and advance their careers. It starts to change the conversation because they know that for me being on the inside, I am doing the good work and trying to make a difference here. It's not always negative. There are these groups and departments here that are trying to make a difference and help Indigenous community members.
Thanks.
Si je peux me permettre d'ajouter en français, Daniel, ça ressemble un peu à mon point, à moi, ça ressemble un peu à ce que Aaron vient de dire en anglais. L'importance de changer les choses de l'intérieur. Je pense que maintenant, on est rendu à un point où les actions ont besoin d'être mises de l'avant. Et je pense que la jeunesse autochtone a compris ça. Donc, a bien compris qu'on voulait mettre des actions en avant et je pense que c'est ce qui fait qu'on se joint tous ensemble à joindre nos voix de l'intérieur pour pouvoir faire des modifications. Moi aussi, ça m'est arrivé d'avoir ces discussions-là un petit peu difficiles lorsque j'ai pris la décision de quitter le privé pour aller au public, au gouvernement du Canada. Et puis, on m'a dit, tu vas aller travailler pour l'ennemi. J'ai dit, bien, pour défaire un ennemi, il faut être devant, il faut lui dire ce qui ne fonctionne pas. Donc, je me suis donnée, je me suis permise d'entrer dans les grands murs du gouvernement du Canada en me disant que j'allais changer les choses à petite échelle. Et je pense que c'est ce que Aaron mentionnait aussi, c'est en étant ensemble qu'on va être en mesure de faire de grands changements. Donc, c'est un peu vers ça que... Et je pense qu'au niveau de la balance, c'est important de garder contact avec les aînés. Dans mon cas, à certains moments, oui, c'est difficile de faire la part des choses et je ne mentirai pas entre je suis représentante du gouvernement du Canada et je suis une personne autochtone. Et puis, moi, n'étant pas en mesure de retourner dans ma communauté puisque les Malécites n'ont pas de réserve. Donc, je ne peux pas aller consulter nécessairement des aînés. Avec le CUMIC qui est offert, là, ça me donne la possibilité de consulter des aînés là, rapidement. Donc, si j'ai besoin de, comme on dit, venter, d'avoir envie de dire des choses qui pourraient ne pas cadrer avec le reste, je me permets de le faire dans un endroit sécuritaire où je peux me permettre de parler de ces choses-là. Donc, c'est important de dire ce qu'on a à dire, de trouver les bonnes personnes avec qui discuter quand ça va moins bien.
Merci. Sandy, any thoughts?
Yeah, that's always something that I had always struggled with when I was going to school, you know, thinking about where am I going to go? What kind of career is it going to allow me to be me as an Indigenous woman, as a Cree woman from the Mushkegowuk territory? So I was really lucky to have a random phone call. Well, actually, how it happened was I happened to be at an Indigenous career fair, and I was keeping in mind about what I wanted for my next career opportunity or my job opportunity. So I was going around asking each of the booths, what are you guys doing for Indigenous reconciliation? And I think that caught the ear of somebody, and then they kind of like, I would love to take your resume. So, you know, I gave them my resume, never really thought anything of it. Out of the blue, I get this call from this wonderful, wonderful woman named Toonie Julie. And she was just so warm and inviting and just willing to talk to me about my career and wanted to know what I was interested in. And we just hit it off. And then that's how I was recruited into ESDC, Employment Social Development Canada. And it has been so rewarding and so a lot of learning, but at the same time, safe, culturally safe. And I think that was what was really important to me, because it allowed me to reconcile that me being Indigenous, but also as a public servant, they were allowed to coexist and to be able to do the work that we were doing and to be able to create that space for other Indigenous employees to come into public service. We're having those conversations with other hiring managers, with other people who wanted to become allies in the public service. So that was truly meaningful for me, and that's why I'm so committed to my team, you know. And I can't imagine myself in a different team, but at the same time, I want to take this experience and share it with other departments. So I'm always open to those kinds of opportunities, but I do love the work that I am doing, and I hope that I can recreate that. And as for like recommendations for public service colleagues to encourage more hiring of Indigenous people from Indigenous backgrounds, it's being aware of cultural differences and how it might come out into an interview. It being aware, developing that cultural awareness and sensitivity, and being cognizant of, you know, the differences that might seem, you know, what you're used to or what you might see with like in other interviews with the way it structures, or even changing the way you do things to be more open. That might bring in like more inviting results. And then also having Indigenous representation when it comes to going out and recruiting people. I find my own personal experience when we were able to go out into communities, we would, you know, partner with other booths and stuff. And sometimes there would be non-Indigenous public service recruiters there. As soon as I left the booth, nobody would come to the table. But as soon as I came back after my break, you know, we'd be getting more Indigenous participants. So representation really does matter, because it allows that safe space to have those conversations, to say, you know, we're public service. This is what we do. This is what we can offer. There is space for you here. So that's, yeah, I think that sums about it.
That's really important. And actually, you're touching on a lot of the themes that are coming up in some of the questions in the chat. So maybe along those lines, you know, there have been a number of questions about what can we do to increase the representation of Indigenous public servants, what practices have to change and how we go about recruiting. And, you know, what barriers are there that we need to try to overcome. Donc, quelles sont les actions en place qui aident au recrutement et au maintien des employés autochtones dans la fonction publique, et comment on peut confronter des barrières existantes? So, Aaron or Isabel, did you want to add on to that point?
So for that question there, and trying to help encourage more for hiring of Indigenous people from across Canada, I come solely from an HR background here and within human resources, and throughout everything that I see, and I like to have honest, hard conversations with a lot of hiring managers and a lot of senior leaders. And they always come back to me and they always say, oh, we have increased our efforts to try to improve Indigenous awareness in the organization, but it hasn't related to Indigenous recruitment. And so I've always gone back on that question and that subject and that term of Indigenous awareness. And as great as it is to increase for your organization and for your team and your department, it's great that more and more non-Indigenous people are becoming aware of the challenges that Indigenous people face. But when I posed the question to them and I said, for me as an individual, I'm aware of a lot of things that are going on in the world, but do I possess the intelligence and the knowledge and the know-how in order to speak on their behalf and advocate for them? And always the answer is no. So I say Indigenous intelligence, Indigenous awareness is step one. That's what we want to create, but we have to look at the other factors of creating more than that awareness. Go beyond that, all right? What are the really impacts? So when you're having those conversations and you're really looking at ways to address systemic barriers, you know exactly what is going on, what community members are facing, what other challenges that are in the north, that are in the west, that are in the prairies here, that are on the East Coast. It's going that extra step. And that's where conversations need to happen. And that knowledge and that information needs to be shared with that right away. It's going beyond that. It's not just increasing Indigenous awareness and checking off a box. It's creating that Indigenous intelligence, that Indigenous knowledge, and that Indigenous know-how. So if you're in a position where you have to speak on behalf of Indigenous people, you can speak accurately to the challenges and the lived experiences that they have faced.
Yeah, it's very true. Isabelle, des choses à ajouter?
En fait, j'ajouterais juste que c'est important des événements comme celui-ci qu'on organise aujourd'hui. Je pense que ça fait aussi partie des choses à faire pour pouvoir réussir à aider, à changer la perspective ou l'opinion que les gens peuvent avoir. Donc, justement, comme Erin mentionnait, là, je renchéris là-dessus, d'avoir des discussions avec le cœur ouvert, d'être honnête et d'être authentique et de dire la vérité sur les vrais défis devant nous, là, de ne pas cacher la vérité. Puis je pense que, comme tout le monde le sait, la vérité a été cachée assez longtemps, donc c'est le moment de prendre action puis d'être honnête, de se dire les vraies choses. Donc, d'organiser des beaux événements comme celui-ci, ça permet de parler de ces choses-là ensemble puis d'écouter les autres pour pouvoir justement faire la différence.
So I always like to say, recruitment is just the first step, and increasing the numbers of Indigenous employees isn't going to matter unless we have the right networks and supports and sponsorship in place to help people succeed in their career and to be safe and comfortable in their work environment. So I'd like to ask, and this is again another theme that's cropped up in the Q&A, a lot of questions around mentoring, networking, training. What supports have you found most beneficial in your career to date? And what do we need to do to perhaps improve access to some of those services or opportunities? Erin, maybe I'll jump back to you.
Perfect. For me, in my careers, as I say, as both sides of my life here with it, I've had a mentor through every step. And for me, I've had both Indigenous mentors and non-Indigenous mentors. The latest one, the mentor that I've had, that I recently seeked out, was from the private sector. They work at the Big Four. It's from Deloitte. She comes back with a communications perspective, is because for me to develop the way that I want to, and to gain the insight and the knowledge of how to succeed from a communications perspective, because for me as a person, as I really don't have that skill set right away in writing. I can talk for hours, but in writing, I really don't have that. And so as a mentor and as a coach to help me improve, that is one area that I realized in my self-assessment that I need to improve. So I have to find somebody out there that will help me do that. And so It was through networking. It was through LinkedIn and doing almost like a cold call a little bit to figure out how can I find that out. But for me, last year here, it was exactly a year ago, I was leading the Indigenous Student Employment Opportunity Initiative. And we held mentoring sessions, which we had over 30 different mentors. Roughly 50% of them were bilingual. They were Indigenous, that were available to students, a part of the public service, that they could go in and ask questions. They could go and get different resources. They could start building that relationship through them. And through mentorship, there's always that term with mentorship. You always think, oh, it has to be a 3 to 5 year commitment. All right. But within mentorship, there's also that mentorship plus aspect. All right. Because it can go beyond that. They can go like such as coaching. All right. Coaching would be a very short, specific period of time that you may need assistance or bounce ideas off of. There's also sponsorship that a lot of departments and people will do is they'll sponsor you, such as for like CPA or for finance or for IT fields, those sponsorships are you're able to achieve the things that you want to achieve. So there's a lot of different facets with that. And I really encourage a lot of people is to really look at what are they looking for, because it's great to have that long-term relationship, which I still do with a couple of my mentors, but I've also developed coaching relationships as well too, to really help me achieve that next set of goals that I want to do. And so I really encourage a lot to see what avenues and areas that you really are looking for assistance in and for development in, and then go for them and then seeing where you can get them.
Sandy or Isabelle, as-tu des expériences avec des mentors ou des coachs, des réseautages?
Sure. My experience has been different. It might be because of my own personal, my personality. I am naturally an introvert, but extrovert if I need to be. So when it comes to networking or mentoring, networking, I do it kind of in the background, talking conversations. They need to be meaningful conversations for me. As for mentors, I indirectly had leaders that I had looked up to, but not a mentor directly. The type of leaders that I gravitate towards are usually strong Indigenous women who are humble but powerful. They're the movers, the shakers, the ones that are getting things done in the background, and also have that quiet reserve when they are faced with something that is telling them no. They have that ability to rebut, to come back with something and then actually get the agenda moving, their agenda moving forward. So I look up to those type of leaders. There's been quite a few that I'm really fortunate to work alongside with. I try my best to emulate, some of their skills or some of the way that they carry themselves. They have deeply influenced the way I carry out my own work, and they have always encouraged me to be true to myself. I was always curious about seeking out a mentor, but I think the one that's available at ESDC, I looked at it and then I shied away from it because it seemed like such a huge process. And I was like, I'm just looking for a relationship because I like relationships to happen organically. And that felt too much of a process for me, but some people like it. For me, I'm more of an organic relationship builder.
Thank you. No, and there's nothing to say you just need to have one mentor either with, a formal title, but, we find our people who we naturally gravitate to. And if you invest in those relationships, they'll be there for you over the long haul for sure.
Je peux peut-être ajouter en français,
Oui,
je m'excuse.
vas-y.
En fait, moi, au niveau des mentors, j'ai pas nécessairement, un peu comme Sandy, j'ai pas nécessairement eu de mentor officiel. Par contre, je tiens quand même à préciser qu'au niveau des gestionnaires, de mon vécu, les gestionnaires que j'ai eus depuis le début de ma carrière ont été vraiment d'un support très présent. Donc, c'est important d'avoir des gestionnaires qui nous ressemblent. Moi, je dis souvent aux jeunes étudiants quand je les rencontre, choisissez vos équipes, choisissez ce qui vous intéresse, puis connecter avec la personne qui va être votre leader. Donc, c'est important de pouvoir se référer à cette personne-là, puis qu'elle vous ressemble ou qu'elle puisse aller combler un peu ce qui vous manque, vos forces, vos faiblesses, pour être en mesure de pouvoir grandir comme employé. Et puis, je pense que nous avons de grands gestionnaires au sein du moins de mon département, et je pense dans chaque département, il y a de grands gestionnaires sur qui on peut compter vraiment, vraiment beaucoup, là. Donc, de se rattacher à son gestionnaire ou son superviseur, c'est vraiment aussi une façon d'avoir un mentor un peu non officiel, mais qui peut d'être d'une grande aide.
Merci. There were also a number of questions around sort of supports, almost, I guess, peer support for Indigenous employees, related more to less about career development and advancement, but more about a sense of safety and belonging at work, referencing in particular MP Kagak's farewell statement in the House of Commons yesterday, where she talked about even in the House of Commons, not feeling there was a place for her, not feeling safe in interacting with security and others at work. Are there supports that you've accessed? Isabelle, vous avez mentionné le CUMIC, par exemple. Je sais qu'il y a d'autres. But what's your experience been with the Indigenous employee community, and where have you been able to find, I guess, those informal peer-to-peer supports? And what advice would you have for people looking for those, to build those kinds of networks?
So for that perspective, I'll touch on that here. Is when I was a student, there wasn't much around, and so it was pretty much your network here was kind of like your team, and then you kind of branch it out after that if you started to build relationships organically with people. But I know now that there is a lot more networks that have been created, such as the last year here, which was the National Indigenous Student Circle. All right, that's a group that was formed by the Aboriginal Center of Expertise. That is a nationally one. And then for Western students, the Western Indigenous Student Engagement Network, which that one was created about 3 years ago. And then the national one was created about a year ago. So they're very much new, but those groups, those networks, or those circles, they do a lot of different events throughout the year to connect students, because everything is now virtually here, and it's incredibly important now to still maintain those relationships and those connections, whether it's through this video. I know you don't get that in-personal connection here, but you're still able to have a conversation. You're still able to see a face, if possible. You're still able to hear a voice. And that's where those connections, that's where those supports really start to happen. And the hardest part I've always said, and I've always dealt that with, was it's just reaching out right away and seeing, how can I join this here? Or just sending that first email that's saying, hey, can I join this circle here? That was always, for me, the hardest step. And through the conversations that I've had with other individuals, they've also echoed that, because they said, as soon as I joined that, the world opened up after that. I was able to connect with so many people, find so many different resources. So that first step is just sending out that first email to somebody saying, hey, do you have a network that I could join? Or if not, could you show me where to go?
Or maybe if I can add on that, create one. Faites-le. S'il y en a pas, do it. And people would join you. So that's my 2 cents.
Great, thank you. Around the hiring process, I know there, again, I'm looking at the questions that have come in, lots of great ones. Lots of questions and concerns around, I think, that, precarious nature of that early phase of our careers. And I remember, being a casual and then a term and then getting a co-op so I could be bridged in. And so a lot of nervousness. And I think especially in the remote work environment, it adds to it, because we don't have those natural networking opportunities. So if you could give advice to someone who is in that situation, worried about their, future potential opportunities, what would you tell them? What kind of is it training? Is it networking? What would be the key to securing that long-term commitment from the employer?
Je pense que de mon côté, je dirais le networking est vraiment quelque chose d'important. je me concentrerais sur le networking ou la création de contacts. Quand on est dans des rencontres comme ça, nos noms sont présents, c'est possible de nous trouver. Ça prend un petit courriel pour arriver au bon moment. Tu sais, c'est trouver le bon moment, la bonne job pour la bonne personne. Des fois, la vie fait bien les choses. Donc, on prend la chance d'écrire à quelqu'un, d'écrire à Erin, d'écrire à moi ou à Sandy. Ça peut être d'autres contacts que vous vous êtes faits. Donc, moi, je recommande souvent aux étudiants, prenez la chance d'écrire ou allez sur Gueds et puis regardez le nom des différents directeurs ou qui peuvent peut-être chercher quelqu'un à combler un poste. Présentez-vous, vendez votre salade. Ça vaut la peine de prendre la chance. Parfois, on peut avoir des belles surprises qui ressortent de ça. Donc, chaque personne est un contact ou connaît quelqu'un. Donc, le bouche à oreille, je crois, est vraiment nécessaire dans cette façon-là. Je pense que ça peut faire des grands miracles.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I was
Sandy?
going to add, for me, like, I still get very shy, and networking, you know, has always been an interesting process for me, but it does help, you know, as for a newer employee and you're not sure what your next contract is going to be or whether you're going to be bridged in. It does help to have those conversations, let them know that you are interested. Is there opportunities? I'm, you know, having those conversations with your hiring manager, because most of the time they are more than willing to listen, and to maybe they might have something else that might not be where you're working right now, but it might be, they might have connections where they know somebody else who is looking. It's just putting yourself out there. And another thing too, when it comes to networking, finding out where the networks are. Most of the times these networks are volunteer basis, and you could be offering, you know, support, of course, with permission of your manager, because some of them require a little bit of time away from your usual day-to-day job. But having those conversations as well is like, yes, I would love to support this. I want to see where can I help? These are the things that I'm interested in. These are the skills that I bring forward. And it's okay to talk about what you have accomplished before. You don't have to boast about yourself, but you could say that I have experience doing such and such, you know, or I've done this before. I'm a little bit knowledgeable in this area. And even those, bringing in those types of skills to the table or to the conversation might even open up more doors or get you noticed more when it comes to trying to network. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. So lots of people want to hear your advice. So if you had one piece of advice to a new Indigenous public servant, what would it be? Erin, we'll start with you.
The biggest piece that I would give somebody is to use your voice. All right. You were brought in for a reason. You have great ideas. You have great experience. Use your voice and own it. All right. If something doesn't sit well with you, that whether it's a process or something is that they're doing a project or something else, and it just doesn't sit right, speak up and use your voice with that. Right? Because that's how you're going to help the team succeed, but that's also going to help you succeed as well, because the more and more comfortable you become with that, and the better it is. Because for me early on, I was this fresh-faced person coming from Winnipeg here in this government world here, where I was sitting in these meetings here and I'm just like, you know what? I feel like I need to say something, but at that time I didn't. And I regretted that. And I know some of us, we have those feelings as well too. It's like, you know what, I should have said this. So this was the idea that I had with it. And then I would have went back to my manager and said, we actually, this was my idea here. And then he or she at the time would have came back and said, why didn't you say something at the time? And I'm like, oh, because I didn't really feel like it was my place. And they said, no, if you don't like the way that something is going, all right, we brought you in for a reason. You have an incredible mindset and the way you process ideas. If it doesn't sit well with you because you're brand new to the public service and all these managers and everything else, they've been here for a while and it's they drank the Kool-Aid here and everything else like that. If you don't see it, all right, voice it and then we can change it, right? Because we need those different perspectives. So use your voice and own it right away. Don't be afraid to speak up.
Great. Sandy.
Don't be afraid to ask questions. Honestly, asking questions, it's something that I was afraid to do when I first started. And I found that it took me so much longer to get acquainted into learning the jargon of government language. So asking questions and having those types of conversations, like, what does that mean? What are you talking about? So those are perfectly okay. It's okay to learn.
Isabelle,
Et-
des conseils.
Oui, ben en fait, le conseil que je donnerais, ce serait de choisir un ministère dont le mandat et les valeurs nous ressemblent. Donc, de sélectionner un ministère qui, pour nous, est important parce qu'à la base, il faut être passionné et il faut se connecter avec quelque chose qui nous ressemble pour être en mesure de, justement, on dit qu'on ne travaille pas. Toute notre vie, si on vit d'une passion, on n'a pas l'impression de travailler. Donc, je pense que si on se connecte à ça, on va pouvoir faire des belles choses. Alors, je recommande un ministère qui nous ressemble. De prendre le temps de les évaluer, de les regarder, de faire une liste des ministères, puis de regarder le mandat et les valeurs, sans aucun doute.
Find your passion. It's very good advice for work and for life. Going back to the chat, another question. Do you see an improvement in the tone, awareness level, and overall rhetoric in the government surrounding Indigenous people and issues?
I'll touch that one.
Go ahead. I was going to say, I can, 23 years under my belt, I can say yes, but I'm very curious to hear what you all think. Go ahead.
Well, like going back to one of the earlier questions, I said, like, what your reluctance of joining public service, that was always been my perspective, and my past experiences just stay away from public service. But I find that there are positive changes happening. May not be all across the government. Like, there are still some places that, some areas that may need a bit more work, or there's a bit more awareness. But I find that the appetite for change is there. There is newer conversations, people more willing to come and say, I want to learn, or what can I do to help? And there are more allies stepping up, and I'm definitely seeing a lot more of that coming into my work. So at ESDC, and I'm hoping that is the same for other departments as well. So I'm gonna say, yeah, it's growing. It's not where I'd like it to be, but it's happening.
Aaron, Isabel?
And from the time that I have joined to the time that I'm currently here with it, I have seen positive changes within the government of Canada, because it is this monstrous mountain that we're all trying to climb here within the government. So many departments here. And yes, we do take some step backwards some days or some weeks or some months. But at the end of the day, we're always taking those 2 steps forwards. And for me and everyone that I've connected with and spoken to, is we have, each and every day that we come and do our job, we are trying to create a positive impact. All right. We are trying to advance reconciliation. We are trying to help community members. We are trying to change the narrative, because yes, there's been the terrible history that the government of Canada has had to Indigenous communities and Indigenous people. But it's time that we start changing that, all right? Because we take those 2 steps forwards. Even if we do take that 1 step back, which we do some days, we are still moving forward in that positive direction. And that's something that keeps me motivated, because I want to be part of that change. I want to create a better future for Indigenous colleagues, for Indigenous community members. I want to be a part of that. So when I sit back in one day and talk to grandkids and everything else, and they say, what did you do here? I can go back to them and say, when I was working with the government of Canada, I positively contributed to helping Indigenous community members.
Thank you. So there is a question as well from one of the non-Indigenous participants who's sitting in with us today. And they're asking, given I'm in a job that's not outward facing, so it's an internal service, are there any more active ways I can work to become an ally? beyond listening to diverse Indigenous perspectives and seeking out opportunities for learning and cultural awareness. So what advice would you give to your non-Indigenous colleagues?
Je peux peut-être y aller, ça
Oui,
va être en
vas-y,
français,
Isabelle.
si tu veux
Oui.
peut-être traduire pour
Oui.
la question. Moi, je recommanderais d'être curieux, d'être humble et d'être honnête sur le fait que ça se peut que vous ne connaissez pas tout. Et parce que même nous, on ne connaît pas tout sur l'histoire. Il y a plein de choses qui, comme on peut le voir, qui ressortent. Donc, d'être humble face à ça et puis d'arriver avec cette attitude-là de dire « je suis curieux, je veux vous aider, je veux être votre allié ». Je pense que cette attitude-là aide beaucoup à voir la bonté des gens, l'ouverture des gens de devenir l'allié des personnes autochtones. Je pense que et les alliés sont nécessaires. Donc, prenez la place qui vous revient. Déjà, d'avoir cette pensée-là, vous êtes déjà un allié sans le savoir.
So if you have that openness, you're already an ally without knowing it. Be curious, be humble, be honest about what you don't know, and approach the issues with a spirit of openness. That's Isabel's advice. Aaron or Sandy, anything to add?
For that, when looking at internal thing, it's when you're in that role and there's always these projects or these files that come up that are touching on Indigenous issues such as recruitment, retention, advancement, or reconciliation, and you're in those conversations with it, and you're wanting to become an ally and support Indigenous communities. When throughout those discussions, if there's no other Indigenous members within there, all right, it would be up to you there, because you are acting as an ally for Indigenous people, is questioning where this project is going to go. Is this going to help Indigenous communities or is this not? And those are the type of questions that you have. So if we're looking at those internal facing ones, it's having those and advocating for them. If there is no Indigenous community members present or in that room, is being that voice for them.
Thank you. Okay, so I want to just take a moment and highlight lots of information being shared in the chat. So questions around how to connect with the Federal Youth Network, employment opportunities for Indigenous people. So save that chat before we wrap up today. There's lots of good stuff there. Some of the other questions that are remaining around training, I would just highlight, so people are looking, access to language training opportunities, access to mentors.
There is also micro-mission that is important. I am doing one, so je pense que c'est bien l'opportunité de pouvoir travailler pour un ministère, mais d'aller faire des micro-missions. Par exemple, j'enseigne des cours avec l'École de la fonction publique, mais mon ministère de base est ailleurs. Donc, je pense que ça nous offre plusieurs opportunités de pouvoir toucher à différents domaines ou d'aller toucher à une passion qu'on a tout en travaillant dans notre poste régulier.
I just want to circle back. There's a couple of questions we haven't gotten to, and I'm just going to throw them out there and you can pick which one you want to answer. But there are a couple of questions around the job posting process and how it affects Indigenous and other employment equity groups. There is a question around how to access language training. And I think, Isabelle, vous avez déjà mis dans le chat les liens pour le post-secondary recruitment. But on the recruiting process, what is missing from the process and what are some recurring concerns? We will pause with those. And then the last question, I think this is probably the last one we'll have time for before I can move to the closing question. But I think it's an interesting one, especially in the COVID context, as I sit here in my sweatpants and with my COVID hair. But would you say dressing for success is something worth investing in? So recruitment, dressing the part, and access to training. Any final thoughts on those three questions? Take your pick.
Sure.
Go ahead, Sandy.
So in regards to recruitment, in the job posting, actually, I had the opportunity to develop a job posting and an inventory that was, focusing on Indigenous candidates. So that was the whole process of creating a job poster and working with, certain requirements in order to post a job was, that was a lot of work. And I noticed, like, it was brought to my attention that itself is creating a barrier. So one of the ways that our team had to work around it was not put any merit on it, and to just focus on, are you interested in working with Indigenous communities? Do you have experience working in the community? Like, all those things that speak to an Indigenous lived experience and how that can translate into public service work. So that was our main feature of this posting. And the reason why we did it that way, even though it might not be, the traditional way of job postings, as the way job postings go, was because we knew that there was a lot of, like, even including myself, I have done it myself, where I look at the GC jobs and it's like, oh, this looks interesting. And then I see all the merit criteria and it's like, I don't see myself at all, or I don't think my experience translate. So I self-screen out. So our job posting was just like, send us your resume. Do you have an interest? Do you have experience in this area? Or do you want to work in this area? And we received over almost close to 500 applicants. And then we had to filter out and do that whole process. It was a long process, and we're still finishing it up. But the thing I found is that creating that space where they can see themselves in a position or a potential position, and being, inviting them to just send us your resume. We want to have those conversations with you. I think those are really helpful in the recruitment process. And then also keeping up that communications. That's something I'm still struggling with, but I'm doing my best to try and keep up with the communications of that whole process that I'm still working on, almost done. But yeah, that was one thing. And then dressing for success. Yes, you don't have to dress it all the time. But when it comes to when you want to present yourself in a certain way, when you're meeting with a potential manager or a job opportunity, yes, you must dress for the success, because it emulates what you want to share with others. If you're just going to show up in just a ripped up t-shirt and some jeans, then you're not presenting your best self. In my own opinion, for me, I need to feel good in order to show that I am, I'm a key. I'm a keeper.
Thanks, Sandy.
And just to further those questions there as well too, and when we look at the recruitment process and for where I am and the areas that I work in here, we look at what are the barriers that are currently in place. And the first one there is, yes, the job posters are online, but let's take a step back there. And in order to access that, you have to have an internet connection. And as we know that there are a lot of communities that don't have access to stable internet connection, that is in fact a barrier for a lot of Indigenous people to find meaningful employment and to submit their applications, because there's a lot of great people there, but they cannot submit it. And I know with the federal government's commitment that they have stated publicly to get every community access to high-speed internet, that is one step in the right direction. So we can remove that barrier here. And when we talk about the language training, for me, being predominantly growing up in Winnipeg here, yes, it's a bilingual city, but I was always in an English environment. That's what I spoke. And so if I wanted to learn the language, I had to go and ask for it. It wasn't automatically given. I had to take that extra step and say, yeah, I want that. I need to learn that second language here. So that's what I did with it. And the third part there, dressing for success, even though when we're in a virtual environment, a lot of us have great personalities. And usually before in the office here, I was able to kind of show off my personalities because I would have kind of like a very cool wardrobe. Everyone always said, they're always like, oh, you dress really good for the office here. It's like Miami vibe sometimes. I'm like, yeah, well, that's missing right now here and being at home. So doing this here is, I'm still in like a full suit with my stuff here, but that's a little bit for me is how I'm still able to show my personality and still feel like I'm in that office environment, even though I'm solely remote here in my home office.
And I would just add, there's so much amazing Indigenous fashion out there right now. Don't be afraid to use your style to show who you are and support some Indigenous creators. So I think that brings to the end our time for the Q&A, but I'd like to thank you all so much for sharing your insights with us today. We've covered a lot of ground. Maybe we could ask the organizers to leave the chat open for a few minutes afterwards, because I don't know, you guys are younger and maybe better at multitasking than I am, but I was trying to balance the Q&A and lots of questions and follow up in the chat. So maybe we could leave that open so you'd have a chance to just go back and scroll through and see if there's anything in addition you want to add. Merci à vous tous pour des excellentes questions et vos commentaires. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our champion, Gina Wilson, to offer some closing remarks. Donc, merci, miigwech, walalio, and over to you, Gina. Take care and happy National Public Service Week. Happy National Indigenous Peoples Day.
Awesome. Thanks, Danielle. C'est avec plaisir que nous avons écouté chacune d'entre vous nous parler de vos expériences dans la fonction publique et de la manière dont vous avez pu avoir un impact positif et durable, même si vous êtes en début de carrière. I just love this panel. I just really, really love this panel. I learned a lot. J'ai appris beaucoup aujourd'hui. I'd like to thank each of you for sharing your stories, sharing your experiences, sharing your insights, and doing so in such a genuine, open way. I think we are in good shape for the future. I would say that to Danielle, like she has been around for a while, like I have. We are in truly good shape for the future. Thank you for that. I just want to encourage two more things. Want to encourage all of you to join part 2 of this series for career discussions coming forward. So stay tuned and get some info on that. I think it's in the chat. There's a busy chat and busy questions. And I need your help. I want to ask for your help, actually. I'm hoping to recruit you to be ambassadors of sorts, to recruit others, because I want to see more and more Indigenous people join the public service. I want to see more and more Indigenous peoples rising in the ranks. And the best tool that we have found so far, it's not social media, it's not posters, it's not anything else. It's Indigenous people working within the public service, telling other Indigenous people not working in the public service that it's a pretty great place to work, that you can have very meaningful experiences. You can make change from the inside. You can earn a pretty good salary comparable to many, and you got great benefits. Now, I know those things, you're not probably thinking about benefits right now. I'm thinking about retirement, and someday, and I'm pretty happy to have been in the public service because it's a great package. So all that to say, I need your help in that regard, and I would appreciate if you can recruit a few folks into the public service. So I'm going to leave it at that. Again, thank you all very much for being here, and thank you to the panelists again. Merci encore pour votre participation et bonne journée à tous. Bye.